Hey everyone, and welcome to GitHub Universe. Whether you're a student, educator, or employer, we're all navigating uncharted water right now. In the middle of a massive global skill shortage, the future of education and work have been thrown into flux. We need to completely rethink everything we thought we knew about how to train our next generation of technologists. I'm here today to give you a small preview of that future. For those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Swift, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Major League Hacking. I was an aspiring lawyer turned software engineer after I attended my first hackathon. Since that day, almost a decade ago, I've been doing everything I can to empower our next generation of technologists, helping them learn the skills and build the networks that they need to launch their careers. Today at MLH, we power the largest community of early career developers in the world. If learning to code is like getting from 0 to 1, MLH helps developers get from 1 to 100, or landing their job. In 2019 alone, more than 100,000 developers worldwide joined our community. It's all driven by hands-on, experiential learning through events like hackathons, workshops, meetups, conferences, fellowships, and everything in between. Any place that developers can gain experience using the technologies they'll need in their career, you'll find Major League Hacking there, supporting that journey. Now, as part of running a mission-driven, community-first organization like MLH, you need to have your finger on the pulse of the developer world. At the very beginning of the pandemic, we knew something was wrong. We started hearing from tens of thousands of developers in our community that they were losing the summer internships they were counting on. All told, by the time we got to June, nearly 40,000 people in our community had been impacted. They were counting on those internships to launch their careers, and employers were counting on them too, to help close that widening skills gap that's threatening trillions of dollars in our global economy. Even before the pandemic, 90% of hiring managers reported that it was difficult to find and hire the right tech talent. Just imagine the ripple effect we're looking at here. We knew we needed to do something about it. So we teamed up with our friends at GitHub to reimagine tech internships for the post-COVID world. What we discovered challenges everything we thought we knew about internships. It ends up there's a faster, cheaper, and more effective way to train our next generation of technologists, all while building the talent pipeline that every company depends on. But to understand why, we need to take a step back and examine the reasons that internships are necessary in the first place. Now, growing up, I always assumed that the path to a career looks something like this. It all revolved around earning a degree that certified to employers that I had the prerequisite knowledge to do the job they hired me to do. What I quickly learned is that that path is not that direct, and there's a massive leap between knowing the concepts and being able to actually apply them. In fact, only 16% of students believe that university is actually preparing them for their first job. Among aspiring software engineers, I wouldn't be surprised if it was even lower. Now, educating our next generation of technologists is an uphill battle. This is true whether you're looking at a traditional CS program or a boot camp. Technology changes so fast that it's difficult for full-time software engineers to keep up. How can we expect our educators, with everything else on their plates, to stay up to date? So what we do is we focus on the areas that don't change very often, either fundamentals or theory. Now, you'd think that knowing the basic concepts and the theory behind everything, that would be enough. But again, I want to emphasize there's actually a massive gap between knowing something and being able to apply it. Ultimately, what employers want to see is that you can use your knowledge to solve real-world problems with code. Let's turn to a simple analogy to make this clear. My favorite comes from Paul Graham. Imagine going to art school to become a painter. While you're there, you study every great painting you can find. Your professors walk you through color theory, art history, and they even show you how the masters mix their own colors. But outside a few class assignments, you never really put brush to canvas on your own. Unless you're a prodigy, you're not suddenly going to be a great artist once you graduate. It takes practice and repetition to become a painter. Becoming a software engineer follows a very similar pattern. So how do we actually close that gap and make the transition between school and work seamless? The most ideal situation would be working directly with employers to integrate real-world projects into the curriculum. To do this well in a classroom, the problems would have to be very standardized, and our curriculum would need to change constantly. Unfortunately, That's impractical in most cases. So the next best solution is just to let the students and employers self-organize those experiences. What we're describing is an internship in its purest form. Learners win because the projects are exactly representative of the types of problems they'd be solving on the job. And employers win because they get direct insight into a potential hire, while ideally making progress on some minor project that needed doing. In the best case outcome, the intern gets offered a full-time job at the end of the internship, directly bridging that gap between school and work. In the worst case, the intern still walks away with valuable experience they can put on their CV right away. Ultimately, increasing their odds of finding a job later too, since they've now demonstrated some level of ability to apply what they know. But internships have a host of problems that make them challenging and hard to scale. Identifying enough projects and having enough management and mentorship resources is often a bottleneck. It's usually at the expense of engineering time that would otherwise be spent shipping features. On top of that, we need to make sure the interns actually have a good experience and that they want to come work for us at the end of the program. That requires HR resources to plan events and help integrate them fully into the team. Finally, we haven't even talked about finding said interns yet, which typically involves traveling to lots of campuses, going through thousands of applications, and spending tons of engineering and HR time interviewing. On average, we're spending nearly $16,000 per intern, and that doesn't even account for a big amount of the productivity drain you experience by having them. And I want to dig in a little bit in the process of actually finding interns, which is often the most frustrating part of this for developers and employers alike. A typical intern role is receiving thousands of applications, but it's usually a very small team of people who need to go through them. So naturally, they'd want to rely on search filters to help them surface the applicants they should be spending time with. But this candidate pool is so early in their career that there often isn't enough information on their resume to even do a real filter. If we do turn up any matches with that filter, it's likely we're competing with every other employer under the sun for that talent. The next best option is programming challenges, which developers hate and aren't reflective of the types of problems you'd face on the job. So the question becomes, how do we bridge the gap between school and internships? We need something that's representative of our ability to solve problems with code and that we can put on our CV. The most common manifestation of this is going to be a personal project. The advantage is that you can work on really any problem that interests you, and it's unique to you and your interests. You also don't have to worry about a deadline or being graded at the end of it. Now, there are a bunch of problems here, though. First, it can be really hard to stay motivated when you're working on a personal project by yourself. Second, software engineering is actually more of a team sport, and writing code by yourself isn't really representative of the environment you're trying to learn about. Developers realized that this open-ended personal project idea was really smart, though, and they created something to overcome the motivation and lack of teammates problems. It's called a hackathon. Now, hackathons are events where technologists come together to work on personal projects, in short, marathon-like sprints, hence the name hackathon. Typically, these events take place over the course of a weekend and involve hundreds of participants who self-organize into groups of 3 or 4. Teams work on all kinds of projects, websites, apps, robots, even self-driving cars. And at the end of the event, they show those projects off to each other in a science fair type demo environment. When I first started going to hackathons back in 2009, it was a pretty niche thing. We were lucky if there was one hackathon every month, and it was impressive when 100 people would show up. Today, things have changed. In 2019 alone, my company, Major League Hacking, helped facilitate more than 200 hackathons worldwide, with nearly 70,000 participants. When we surveyed those developers, nearly 90% of them tell us that they're learning skills at hackathons that they could not get in the classroom. Now, before COVID, hackathons had already become the default place for developers to build out their portfolio projects. In the post-COVID world, when the events are virtual, they're even more popular. Companies also really quickly realized that hackathons are pretty awesome too. In addition to all those developers, you'll see these companies and many, many, many more at hackathons every single weekend. Not only are they a great way to get the technologies we care about into the hands of a lot of talented builders, but we can also get direct insight into how they use code to solve problems without having to fully interview someone. But here's where a new problem emerges, though. While hackathon projects are a great indicator of someone's ability to solve problems, they aren't usually a good indicator of the quality of their work. This is because hackathons are sprints, so naturally we take shortcuts along the way. It's not common to see engineering best practices like documentation, tests, or Git history in hackathon projects. Meanwhile, those are all things we really care about when we're looking for an engineer to join our team. So employers love using hackathons as their filters, but it would be great if we had something else that was an indicator of someone's ability to write code that we can actually use in production. The best possible scenario would be a project that someone worked on in the long term, or that just required a higher code quality standard. Luckily, open source is a great place to turn to here. Open source contributions are exactly the type of production quality code sample we want to see. Open source software is used by thousands of companies in production already. And if someone's able to meet the standard of becoming a contributor at a major open source project, well, that's a really strong indicator that they can solve our problems in production as well. As a bonus, since most companies use Git and GitHub for their internal development workflows, we now know that they can use our primary software collaboration tools right out of the gate. But open source isn't a silver bullet. While 92% of developers in the MLH community believe that open source will be an important part of their career and they want to contribute, only about 1 in 4 actually have managed to make an open source contribution in the past. That's because most people either don't know where to get started or just feel like they aren't skilled enough yet. So fast forward back to today. COVID has put a tremendous additional strain on our already breaking system. And we now need to rethink that bridge between school and work once again. What would a modern solution to this problem look like? And could we take the best parts of hackathons, open source, and internships and create something totally new? We put our heads together with our friends at GitHub to come up with a solution. It needed to overcome all of the problems with our current system and the new ones that COVID had created, all while preserving the valuable applied experience that both developers and employers are depending on. What we created challenged all the things we used to believe about internships. This new program is remote first, low lift, affordable, easy to drop in, and built for scale. Plus, it incorporates the collaboration, community, and passion from hackathons and open source. Meet the MLH Fellowship, a new kind of work-integrated learning program. We match developers with real-world projects from our partners like GitHub, Facebook, Amazon, the Royal Bank of Canada, Dev.to, Twilio, Indeed, and the City of New York. Over the course of 12 weeks, they collaborate with other aspiring software engineers around the world on those projects and have access to an amazing group of mentors to support them. They participate in events like a speaker series and hackathons and navigate a fully integrated skill-based curriculum throughout their journey. At the end of it all, they walk away with an amazing portfolio piece, ready for their resume, and they're well on their way to their first job. The projects that fellows collaborate on range from major open source technologies like React, Flask, and Homebrew to closed source tools that you'd find in a typical internship experience. In between contributing to their projects, developers do everything from attending daily stand-ups and reviewing each other's code, giving them first-hand experience of what it's like to be a software engineer professionally. And as an added bonus, we also help train our next generation of great open source citizens on real-world workflows, and even get some of them on the pathway to becoming maintainers themselves. Because the whole thing is built on Git and GitHub, it uses the tools that every company is using already for their software collaboration. The results and positive feedback on this have been overwhelming. We had more than 30,000 developers apply for our first 300 spots in the program. Of those alumni, nearly 70% made their first major open source contributions during this program. And 3 out of 4 said it was the best internship experience they'd ever had. Every single fellow walked away with an incredible resume piece, real-world experience, and a network of other talented builders that will last a lifetime. On the employer side, they made meaningful progress on the roadmaps that they cared about in open and closed source products. They were able to support this next generation of technologists that they're depending on and gain unique insights into a talent pipeline they can tap into whenever they need it. We're now running 3 batches of this program per year, and applications for students are open for spring, summer, and fall 2021 right now. We're also actively partnering with corporate and educational partners who want to support and tap into this talent pipeline and help build the next generation of great open source citizens. For more information, head over to fellowship.mih.io and join us on this journey to reimagine the future of technical education and work. With that, I want to give a special shout out to GitHub for being an amazing partner, for making all of this possible, and for inviting me to speak here today. Thank you everyone for joining me, and happy hacking. I'm Swift.